Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. An absolute pleasure to be able to speak to you today.
And you, nice to see you.
And without giving too much away, can you give people a bit of a flavour of what they can expect if they watch I Came By?
Well, I Came By starts as really, I suppose, you're getting into the world of two young, disaffected men from London who spend their time tagging graffiti signs on walls of posh people's houses, to put it simply. They break into members of the establishment or people who they feel are out of their social reach and just remind them that I came by, and that's where the story kicks off. They then break into, or they plan to break into my own house. I play Sir Hector Blake, who's a esteemed member of the establishment, a retired High Court judge, and then the story takes on a slightly different direction.
And we're quite some distance, I think, from Paddington, Downton Abbey with this role. What was it like for you when you first read that script? And did you have any trepidation about diving into Sir Hector Blake?
The simple answer is no, I didn't. I was intrigued by the script and the way that it took its twists and turns and slightly disrupted your expectations every so often. I love the way the way that your sort of not sympathies, but your expectations ebb and flow across the central characters, and take us on quite an exciting little roller coaster. That's what really gripped me at the outset, and why I was thrilled to be, to take part.
And I had a really fascinating chat with Babak earlier about all of his kind of influences and, how, thinking about when he was, in his 20-somethings and how that kind of influenced some of the characters, but also from other directors, like Hitchcock's Psycho, but putting it in like a very British setting. So what was it like working with him as a director, and did that all come across?
Well, we first started chatting during, I think, one of the lockdowns. So it was all on Zoom and very two-dimensional. And that was obviously frustrating in itself because there's nothing like being, in three dimensions as we are now. And so you can really get to see the whites of their eyes. But the more I got to see the whites of Babak's eyes, the more worried I got because, frankly, he's the most delightful man to work with, and has such a vivid imagination and such passion for cinema, as you've described. His knowledge of cinema history and greats and influences is kaleidoscopic and encyclopedic. And so I just kept thinking, how the heck did this sweet, lovely, energetic guy create this really, really weird film?
And what was the kind of preparation like? And was there kind of a collaborative process on creating this character?
Yeah, we did. We went back and forth a bit about the character. I quizzed him quite closely about making the character's credibility resonate across the film, so that you really believed the world he was in and that where he'd come from, and a couple of character traits along the way we tweaked and talked about, and he was very collaborative and open to that, as I know he was with George and Percy as well, and so it felt like a real team effort, but with Babak absolutely at the helm and creating his vision, as he's a great filmmaker, I think, and this is I think this will fit very well into the canon of his other, not canon makes it sound like he's been around for 40 years, but his emerging work, which I think is really brilliant.
And coming to your fellow cast, I've been a huge fan of Kelly's, from way back when, but also, these great young faces in George and Percy. So what was it like working with these amazing actors?
Well, Percy, I think, is a real, I hadn't come across him before, but he's the camera adores him, and B, he's just a real, screen force, I think. So, he's like the 3 o'clock at Kempton, one to watch. And George, I worked with, when he was a teenager. So I watched his progress from a distance with great pride, and to see him now emerge as a real fine leading man is great, and he's a complete delight. And Kelly, I've known a bit over the years, and this was the first time we worked together, but and only, in fact, I think in one scene. So we didn't interact that much, but we did discuss the virtues of various scents and fragrances and where we get them from in the green room.
And it does feel like it's so rooted in kind of contemporary Britain, and particularly London, like the city itself could almost be seen as a character. So was that something very important in the shooting of it, and what was the shoot like?
I think definitely that's part of Babak's great skill is to bring the landscape to life. The setting is really important, and it's a different sort of angle on London. It's not red London buses and lines in Trafalgar Square. It's a very credible, recognisable urban landscape, but you're seeing different echelons of society within that, but not necessarily the ones that as I say, that you traditionally might see. So you go from the gentleman's club to Sir Hector's house to George's and Percy's background as well. So you're seeing a real cross-section of society, but through a very realistic lens, and creating a very vivid and believable world. And the shoot was equally was great. We filmed in some fascinating locations. My house was in a leafy suburb of southwest London, and I can't remember where they filmed the housing estate sequences, but they were equally vivid and alive. And the Gentleman's Club, and all these sort of different elements that create the patchwork of a recognisable modern London.
I think that really struck me watching it as well is that, you know, on the one hand, it's just that kind of edge-of-your-seat thriller, but there's so many other layers and textures, thinking about how institutions can fail us, whether it's government or police or abuse of power, and also kind of that very entrenched, you know, classism in British society, and you know, are some lives more dispensable than others? So what do you think some of the themes are that come out of it?
Well, I think themes and messages are for the audience to discern or to take away, rather than for creatives to dictate. But I think you touched on some of the things that struck me when I read it were to do particularly with the plight, not the plight, but the voice of the dispossessed or the outsider being unheard, or wanting to express something, which is what the taggers are doing in their graffiti. They're saying, you know, we are here, we are present, but they don't have the voice or the wherewithal to take it beyond that, to actually make a change in society, to actually be constructive with whatever it is that they feel they're lacking. And at the same time, you've got the people at the level of power and judiciary and police who are very happy with the status quo and don't want anything to change. And in the case of Sir Hector Blake, who's been a great champion of the outsider, of the underdog, he wants nothing to change because, you know, frankly, at that level of society and with those many structures in place that protect you, you can sort of get away with murder, really.
And thinking about your own career, like you've done such an amazing array of roles, you know, going back to, you know, Notting Hill, you know, like we're mentioning Paddington and Downton, and now this. So, you know, where do you have your sights set next? What really stood out for you, or do you have any itches you're determined to scratch?
Oh, well, as like most actors, just happy to do the next job. So, you know, there are a few things coming over the horizon. One may or may not involve a bear with a marmalade habit, I don't know, but we'll see. But fingers crossed that, you know, but this is I'm very proud of this film, be a part of it. And so I hope people will go and see it in the cinema, and if not, on Netflix.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all that with us. Can't wait for everyone else to get stuck into this film.
Cheers,
Thanks for your time. Cheers, thank you. Nice to meet you.